Thank you, Hal Lohr, Chief of Independent California. This is on the Independent California Zoom channel. We're going to do a recording of a debate between CalExit and New California. Representing New California is Mr. Ryan Massano. He's been a conservative for many years. He's here in California, and he's well known in the New California movement. He'll be explaining in a second New California and what they think. The format of this debate is, as Mr. Massano just said, to loud dialogue that typically doesn't happen. Left and right typically don't talk. We don't necessarily have to agree, but we should be able to share ideas and share opinions in a professional manner. And IC and Yes California are committed to doing that. The format for today's debate will be 10 minutes by Mr. Ryan Massano without commentary from anybody, explaining why all Californians should support New California, or the plan to split California into a interior state and a kind of a coastal state. After that, we'll go to 10 minutes by Independent California, Shankar and Hal, explaining why people should support CalExit. After that, we'll have cross debate. Ryan, is that okay with you?
Yes, works out.
Okay, so Mr. Massano, please introduce yourself for 10 minutes, and why should everyone in California back New California in your words and opinions, sir?
Sure. So a little bit about myself, a little bit of an unusual background. I'm the oldest of 18 children. I was in the nuclear machinist base aboard ballistic missile submarines. I own my own insurance company. I was just fired here recently for holding up the All Lives Matter sign at a Black Lives Matter rally. I'm now a trucker touring America. That's the brief background about me. I've been with New California for about 4 years. Yesterday, we just completed our 7th convention. We had Candace Owens and Dinesh D'Souza came out and spoke to us. And let me add, I like both of them, but I am not a fan of these well-paid conservative speakers coming out and speaking to conservatives, because there's so many people who don't have much money. You can't afford $200 for these tickets. So anyhow, I digress. So New California is an idea that basically branched off of Jefferson. Paul Preston was originally with Jefferson, spread off, and started New California about 4 years ago. I'm the assemblyman from Solano County. We do have representation in pretty much all 58 of the counties in California. So, I understand, right now, I think most of us, if not all of us, agree that what is going on at the moment is tyrannical. I believe that rebellion against tyranny is obedience to God. And I think all of us are fed up with the way that California is being run, so that we got two different solutions. Ours is to split up into a separate state, and yours is to completely leave America. So I think if we look at my position is that if we look at the Constitution, it's founded by 204 Christians. 202 of those were Protestant. And if you look at the ideas that were very crucial in that, it was the idea that virtue is necessary for liberty. Now, people will say that the government cannot mandate and cannot legislate morality. I beg to differ. The government will either legislate good or bad morality. So with New California, our whole focus is on splitting apart. We have about 80% of the land mass in California. We have about half of the population of California. So our entire focus is to go back to basically the same governing principles that California and America had in 1776. California approximately had in 1849 when the Bear Flag Republic, or whatever year it was, happened. We declared our independence in 2018 at the exact same spot that the Bear Flag Revolt happened at over in Solano County, where, believe it or not, a whopping 35 men declared California free of Mexico and a member of the United States, and that was that. So it does not take large numbers to make these things happen. But the ideas that New California stands for are, low taxation, low regulation. I'm not entirely familiar with the separation movement. I guess one of the main differences, and maybe there's things that I'm not aware of, with totally separating is how would California stand on its own apart from America? That would be my number one concern. Number two, what ideas would be held by California on its own? For our movement, we're very clear on exactly the ideas that we stand for. I mean, our education system, I think, is a wreck. I also want to touch on, I think, 3 of the main problems confronting society right now that are basically really hampering all of our liberties. Those 3 I'll touch on really briefly. I don't have time to go in at length, but I do have my own website where all of these are gone into at length if anyone wants to read. It's called masanonews.com, and I'm in the process of putting about 500 books which detail a lot of what's going on. But the 3 main problems that I can see right now are television. The average American watches 9 years, the worst communication medium in human history. Number 2 is psychotropic drugs. 70 million Americans are on psychotropic drugs right now. You know, people who watch television a lot and are on psychotropic drugs, I would posit, are unfit to vote. And yet these people are voting in the millions. The 3rd problem, and I think this is by far the most pervasive and dangerous one, which affects predominantly us men, would be pornography, which 70% of all clicks online, according to Time, are for pornography. So the idea that the internet is just this great information font is crazy. So our movement, I don't know about your movement, but I know ours addresses all 3 of those problems. Government can't legislate television, but we certainly can get to the root of the Federal Reserve, which is behind the vast majority of our media. And pardon me, I'm in a car wash right now, so if there's excessive noise, you know what it's from. The other thing is we can legislate drugs. You know, making them illegal is a part of a successful society. China allowed pot in, or opium, and 100 years later, her couple-century-old empire was over, and communism followed shortly after. It's no coincidence that the legalization of drugs has come, and we are closer to communism than we have ever been before. And of course, porn should have never been legalized by the Supreme Court in 1969. That's pretty easy. That should be illegal as well. So our movement addresses that. In Proverbs, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. We do have vision. We not only see the problems that are happening right now, we see the solutions. We see how to get there. Within about 3 years, if our patterns are followed, the existing homelessness, crime, and poverty pattern that we see in California right now, it will be definitely addressed and reversed. Again, sorry about the background noise. I am a truck car wash right now, so
You're doing great. Keep going. You're doing great.
So,
Keep going.
I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I think about 4 minutes. But I also wanted to touch on that we stand for representative government. So right now we do 4 minutes. Okay. We don't have representative government here in California. What's happened is basically this gerrymandering has taken place where counties are not really represented. We are going to return to representative government. So Solano County, Contra Costa County, Riverside County, Sacramento, San Bernardino, each county is going to have its own elected representatives, and we're going to do away when we can. I'm pretty sure Trump is a fan of this too, with this the 17th Amendment, which was direct election of senators. We need to go back to where state legislatures elect the senators from the state. That empowers the states far more than what we currently have at the moment. Because right now, basically the media, schools, and tech companies are all controlled by the owners of the Federal Reserve, who none of us know. These are the people who control our ideology. And so we are going to, definitely call that out. It needs to be addressed. So I know I'm throwing in a lot of different ideas, but I just want to be as thorough as possible in about as short amount of time as I can. And I think, if you look at California right now, we have half of the homeless people in this entire nation. So we got 50% of the nation's homeless population, and we got 12% of the nation's population. We have 36% of the people on welfare. We are a dysfunctional state, but the same is true of every Democrat jurisdiction. And really, I'm going to just close because I don't think we can escape recognizing that. Just going to do a 2-minute overview of this, if that's possible. But in 1912, Wilson was elected. Schiff was backed by the Rothschilds. Schiff and the bankers took control of the Democrat Party in 1912, and they've controlled it ever since. All of our wars, World War I, Lusitania was rigged. World War II, Pearl Harbor was rigged. Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin was rigged. Iraq and Afghanistan, 9/11 was rigged. So once you begin to understand our shadow government, realize. And if we're going to effectively address the problems that we're facing, we have to go and bono, follow the money. We need to understand who's behind all this. Who's behind Black Lives Matter, welfare, the media, the tech companies, the attack on Christianity? Who's behind all this? And I would highly recommend my closing remark here. I've got about 2 minutes left. Waters Flowing Eastward was written by the American raised and educated widow of a Russian military officer who came here after the Bolshevik Revolution when her husband was murdered. So she detailed very clearly how this is not a conspiracy theory, this is not anti-Semitic, how the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion was directly related to the chaos that we saw happen in communist Russia and in China, and which is coming to, it is in California, and it is coming to America. So I just want to be very clear about, you know, if anyone wants to debate that, I could go back. There's hundreds of books written on this, but you're not going to find on Amazon in your local library or schools. I know this does not make me a Nazi, a white supremacist, a fascist, a Hitler, and I want to do the Holocaust all over again. I understand how all this works, and that is not the case.
Okay,
so there's a lot of information out there, but I am done. Thank you.
sorry. Thank you, Ryan. I just want to say, I understand. Ryan is with New California. They do not have exactly the same set of values as CalExit. Just because Ryan is saying something and he's here on our conference doesn't mean we all agree. We have different opinions. We have invited Ryan here to have a respectful conversation. It does not mean we agree. It does not mean we agree. So thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate you staying to the time. And right off the bat, I'll give you something. Totally agree. The states should be able to pick senators too. Love California to be able to pick senators. So that's at least something. Okay, let's go to Hal and Shankar. The format for the debate is that if everybody could mute themselves, if you are not Hal or Shankar or Ryan. If you're not Hal, Shankar, or Ryan, if you'd click mute. Hannah, would you consider muting yourself, please? Okay, so we're going to go to Hal and Shankar, Ryan, and they're going to explain why everybody should back CalExit for 10 minutes. But then, Ryan, it gets interesting. We're going to send it back to you, and you get the first round of counterpoints and questions, and you can address what they said or return back to some New California stuff, however you want. We'll try to make it professional from there. So, Hal and Shankar, why should Californians, even conservatives, back CalExit?
Okay, since Shankar is still muted, I think I'll go first. Part of the predominant reason for CalExit is an almost total lack of representation of California and its democratic principles in the federal government. It's simply stated, between the Electoral College and the Senate, California is not being the California vote does not matter. California's socioeconomic needs are not being addressed. California ends up paying getting back 68 cents on the dollar for what California puts into the federal government, which is almost a direct cause of a lot of the ills that Mr. Ryan just pointed out. We're paying for services we're not getting. We're paying for representation. Basically, we are in the 1776 situation of taxation without representation. We don't get back what we put in. I must say I disagree with Mr. Ryan on this one, and I'll address this more later. I don't believe less representation is the answer. For CalExit purposes, it's simple. They would like us to believe that our choices are red or blue, when our choices really are red or blue or gone. We don't have to put up with this. And after reading most of New California's site, it's interesting that there are quite a few parallels. We use the same arguments when dealing with the federal government. They do not represent us, so why should we have to stay? Why should we have to remain part of? Simply put, on top of all of that, what federal government? What federal government do we have? What do we have left? It's economically bankrupt. I mean, it's it's socially completely divergent from California, from 80% of Californians' values. They don't hear us. They don't talk to us. All they want from us is our money. That's why. So why should we remain? And honestly, after this election, there's a fair probability that there won't be a government left to remain in anyway. There won't be an America left. At least none the Californians are going to recognize. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Shankar for the next 5 minutes if he wishes to chime in.
Hello? Yes, okay.
You're on, Shankar.
I'll just say real quick. I'll just say that I agree with Mr. Messiano here about the federal government and the federal and the wars of from the war from 1918 into Vietnam and the solution for you is to remain part of the government. Well, the solution for us is not to. And I don't see how being part of that is changing anything for your family or your community. Why CalExit? Our founding fathers the founding fathers of the United States came here to get away from Christianity and the church. And that's why we have the separation of church and state. And that was the founding principles of the United States. And what we're doing here in CalExit is the exact same thing as what the founders did for the exact same reasons. It's to get away from taxation without representation, a oppressive religious right who is having a thumb over the people, and of course other reasons for the founding fathers left. But we're doing exactly the same thing as the founding fathers, the exact same reasons, and we're following their footsteps. What we're doing is more American than what most Americans do. And that's all I'm going to say about why CalExit for right now. You brought up a lot of interesting points. I think I'd rather take that on the next part of the debate, which I think is a rebuttal.
Okay, Hal, back to you. You still have about 5 minutes for why people should endorse CalExit, or we can go to Mr. Massano to ask questions of you. I also want to thank Nina Sid for coming in. Thank you, Nina. And I will remind everybody, if you have questions for New California, type them in the chat and I will ask them, and we'll make sure to get that. That was the format I explained to everybody. We're not changing at this moment. No offense. This was the deal that I had to get them here. So, Hal, would you like to say anything?
Oh, as an opening statement, I would simply put forward that the United States no longer represents the people of California in any meaningful way. California's makeup, and we can see this in the numbers, which is where I intend to make my arguments. The numbers here are 80-20. 80% of Californians basically are voting to amount to left of center. And this is not through gerrymandering, through basically the Electoral College, through the Senate. This is being all but ignored, and we're facing a hostile threat from the federal government. It's like in the form of everything from Senate bills to the Supreme Court, and that's where I'm going. And that's where I'm going to leave off. California's problems, yes. California has problems. Louisiana has problems. Illinois has problems. The entire Gulf Coast has problems. The Midwest has problems. Everywhere has problems. To address one issue in my opening statement, we are the 5th largest economy on earth.
Thank you.
The moment we are an independent nation, we are a global economic superpower. How California will survive as an independent country, I don't know. How do other global superpowers survive? It's like If you're a global superpower, your survival as a nation is pretty much assured. We will be an automatic member of the G10. We will automatically be invited to the Paris Accords. We will be on everybody's dance card when it comes to trade, global trade. It's like how California will survive as an independent nation. How will California not survive as an independent nation? And I will end my opening statement right there.
Thank you. And for Nina, Nina says she doesn't have sound. Nina, you have sound on our end. You have to unmute yourself. So there should be a button at the bottom of your screen, Nina, where it says allow computer audio, and that would allow you to do that and join in. Another option is leave Zoom and then click right back in, and you should see the prompt to add computer audio. So let's go to Ryan Massano. And
Ryan, I will not take this any longer. For the value of YouTube, we are not an anti-Semitic organization.
You're gonna have to set up mute.
I don't give it.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Mr. Missiano.
Ryan, Hannah and many other members want to let you know that we have many Jewish members and we love them and we don't tolerate anti-Semitism.
It's not Jewish.
Hannah, stop it right now, please.
It is just the idea, Susie. It's his whole idea. I don't want to have an argument with Ryan about anti-Semitism. I just want it known that we resist. It's not. We're not an anti-Semitic organization.
Oh, you gotta boot her, bro. You gotta boot her.
We're not an anti-Semitic organization.
No, and if I can address that, you know, what I said is commonly construed as I have many Jewish friends. I have Jewish friends who lived in communist Russia who completely agree with me. So this has nothing to do with hatred of Jews. I do want to address cultural Marxism, which is at the root of a lot of this, which basically says if you say anything that can be construed as racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, this is what's happening right now. You shut the conversation down and nobody has to listen to what you have to say because you're a Hitler. And that has got to stop. Now, the same people who funded the Bolsheviks funded Hitler. So I'm not a Nazi, and I don't think Hitler was no choir boy. But what the idea that we're just shutting conversations down because of the media, schools, and tech companies tell us there are gods who tell us what we can and cannot discuss, that is very dangerous. And this attack on free speech, it first ends with the end of individual speech, then it starts ending with the ending of people's lives. So I'm not advocating, this, nothing I said can at all be construed as anti-Semitic. If anyone has any questions, the books that I list on my website explain in detail how this is not anti-Semitism. And if Hannah wants to share with us who owns the Federal Reserve, I'd love to hear it.
No. Can we just continue, please?
Let me just say, CALEXIT loves Jewish people, is not anti-Semitic, loves Jewish people, has Jewish members, started with Jewish people. I dated a Jewish girl.
Right, buddy.
Might be part Jewish myself. We love Jews. We love Jews. We love Jewish culture. We love Jewish people. Love Jewish culture. Now, I need you all to shut up and let's continue the interview because it took me a week to get conservatives on here. This is how we build credibility. Conservatives know we exist. So look, liberals, you shouted at them. You let them know you don't tolerate what he said. I already said we don't support his values. We have beaten this topic to death. Shut up. Brian, that's not for you or Nina. I booked this guest. You want to book your own guests? You can run it however you want. Also, this is IC's channel. It ain't yours. And I run this by how. So enough. Okay, you made your point. I made it for you. Book your own guests. Brian, what questions do you have for Hal and Shankar about the CALEXIT movement or any counterpoints to what they said that you would like to disagree with, which is the point we're here for, to disagree with each other respectfully. So, sir, What did Helen Shankar say? Oh, I don't agree. And then we're going to let respectfully Helen Shankar respond. And Mr. Masano and Nina, I would hope that you would respect their time and let them give their opinions to what you said when it's their turn. Ryan and Nina, for a few minutes, what questions or counterpoints do you have?
Yeah, so for I'm just curious, how would you become a new state, like completely separate in a nonviolent fashion? Like, what if you want to go over? Because I'm not familiar with that, so I'm honestly curious about that. Number one, and number two, your new state. What are your views on morale? Like, would you adopt the same basically moral legislative outlook that America had in 1776? Those are the two questions I had. So number one, how would you accomplish it? Can it be done non-violently? And number two, what's the moral framework for your new state, new country, if you will?
Can I take this one?
Please.
Okay, so Ryan, so a new state. How to become a new state? You know, the original founding fathers wanted a state to be individual in itself. For me, there's no handbook. There's no blue book on how to become a nation of your own. It's just written. And the founding fathers barely knew what they did when they read they knew what they were doing. That's why they documented. So why would you think it would be violent? Why this presupposition that separating is going to be violent is so inherent in American mindset. It's exactly the reason why we want to separate. You have countries like Australia and Canada who separated from their mother nation, no problem, no violence at all. But for some reason, there seems to be a belief in the conservative mindset that California separating from the United States is going to be violent. I don't think so. And also, how are you going to do that? Well, if we follow the laws of the United States and the Constitution about how to separate, we'll never separate. So how we're going to do that is first changing the minds of every Californian to first believe that they're Californian and not American. And that is a very long process. Believe me, all grown up can do the pledge every morning and at school and love the United States. And I grew up loving the United States. In the past 20 years, I just became disaffected with it. But the moral question, your second part of your question, is, well, the problems that you stated that are plaguing California would be television, psychotropic drugs, and pornography. Am I right? Those are the top. Well, I'll just let you know.
Not in California, all of America.
Okay, I'll just let you know. All three of those are from California, straight up. All our pharmaceuticals are from here. Television, of course, and porno, of course. Those are fine Californian products that we put out for the rest of the world. Now, you can see it as an issue, of course. If you want to blame people's lack of self-control or whatnot on these three things, go ahead. Morally speaking, where our compass is it? Are you hurting people's lives? Or are we making people's lives more beneficial and more enjoyable? Because if we're Californians making more people's lives enjoyable, that's our moral compass. Being part of the United States, being trapped in endless wars, like you said, dealing with the secret dark underground government, dealing with Donald Trump, dealing with is not Californian life enjoyable at all. And for those reasons, I'll just to answer your questions, I'll concede. And then I think Hal's got 2 minutes. Go for it, Hal.
In answer to the first part of that question, through negotiation. Simply put, through negotiation. It's like we do not need a violent split. It's like we're not seeing a violent split with Scotland and England. We're not saying it's like independent, nations are looking to achieve their independence basically through sit down negotiation. It's like California's interest in the United States' interests have been diverging for quite some time. So basically, although we need each other as trading partners, we will need to maintain relations. After all, we are neighbors.
Yeah.
Formalizing what amounts to, staying in a bad marriage is what we like to look at. Right now, we're staying in a bad marriage for the sake of the marriage. But it is possible that we can separate and still be friends and basically get along for the sake of the children. As far as the morals go of our founding fathers, not at all. No. Those people burned witches. Those people owned slaves. We don't want, it's like, this is the 21st century. This is the 21st century. It requires 21st century solutions. The founding fathers, we're running into problems because of some of the things that the founding fathers codified. Are you saying we should go back to basically removing the vote from women or turning people of color into 3/5 of a human being? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But the correct answer for the morality of California will be up to Californians to decide that. And that through the democratic process. And not dictated basically by people who are 2,500 miles away who are voting on our morality, who we can't vote for. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we get to ask questions to him, Marcus, next, or
eventually?
Yeah, let's have Ryan Masano or Nina Sid respond to what Hal said or ask other questions, and then yes, Shankar. So let's go to Ryan and Nina for a few minutes, and then we'll go back to you, Shankar.
Yeah, to Hal's point, I think I saw a comment along this lines because what's been done in the education system, there's a great book by an author called Crimes, Josh Newman wrote it, or Alex Newman, Crimes of the Educators, and he details how 150 years ago, our schools have been subverted to basically turn us against our own country. So if you begin to look, like, we're commonly told that the founders all had slaves. Well, first of all, a majority of the founders did not have slaves, number one. Number two is every single race and every, I'm sorry?
But they constitutionally codified it.
Right. Oh, right. So, and the whole slave is what, 2/5 of a man or something, 3/5. Okay. That was not to demean slaves, because if the South, who owned slaves, had their way, they would have said that each slave's vote counted as one, because they knew the slaves were going to vote the way they wanted. So the North said, no, you are not going to have each slave count as one, because we already know they're going to vote the way you want them to. So they're going to count as 3/5. So if you look at the background of that, it was not demeaning to African Americans at all.
Yeah, it was.
And then if you look at, every single race in human history has had slavery. That America is one of the fastest nations to get rid of slavery. We are the only nation to fight a war, and yes, the war was actually over slavery. All the succeeding slaves all had listed slavery as a reason for their succession. So, and you got to remember, if we were born after 100 years ago, we've all been brainwashed by the media, schools, and tech companies, and even our family and friends have been similarly brainwashed. So this. And it's very strong and powerful. The thing is, I hear people talk about slavery and the Civil War, and yet the people who criticize America as a slave nation, I have not found, 90% of them can't name 10 Civil War generals. They can't name 10 founders of America. So I wouldn't question exactly the depth of the individual searches that have been done into this topic to draw the conclusions that many have drawn. Because, a shallow search, think about it. Who is easier to control? Isn't it easier to control people who know a little? It is. And yet I would argue that today we are the most historically and biblically illiterate nation as we've ever been before today. I'm absolutely 100% on that. So, there's a lot to be said on that, but I know basically what cultural Marxism does is it takes the founders, says they're all a bunch of slaveholders and and throw them all out. And we have, wait for it, Brave New World. We have well, where did we see this happen before? We already saw it happen in Russia and in China. The American founders were very clear. They saw what happened in France, where their revolution went awry, and next thing you know, you had Napoleon marching all over Europe, creating mayhem and chaos. Well, if you look at today's happenings and how basically the founders and morality are being thrown out the window, it's almost a carbon copy of the French Revolution. Remember, the French Revolution, they put a prostitute at the Cathedral of Notre Dame and said that this was the goddess of reason. Well, how is that any different from today when pornography is legal and they're trying to legalize prostitution? We have the exact same dynamics going. Matter of fact, even more in depth, if you look, and this is my final point, look back when Israel took over, when they took over the Mesopotamian pagans, the Hittites, the Amorites, all that. Those tribes, they used drugs a lot, they were very promiscuous, and they committed human sacrifice. Well, today Democrats do the same thing. Democrats murder babies, that's abortion, human sacrifice. They're very promiscuous, they support porn and prostitution, and they support drugs. You have the exact same dynamics that have been playing out over 5,000 years. When Cortez and 500 men took out 5 million Aztecs, the Aztecs, a lot of their allies left them because they didn't really like having their people sacrificing human sacrifices. They joined Cortez. So you had human sacrifice from the Aztecs. They were very promiscuous. They had orgies. And, they even ate the people they sacrificed. And the last final point is...
that was your final point.
Let's be respectful,
right
please.
I'll finalize right there.
Okay.
Okay, can I address what he said there, por favor? So look, dude, you say you how the whole kitchen sink right there in your one statement. I'm gonna address two. One was your slavery comment, and two, this all the right wing terms, the catchphrases that you guys all love using. I think the latest one now is what is it? Cancel culture or something, and this is one is cultural market. You're very good at inventing terminology. It really exacerbates a problem that really isn't there, and only because it affects the right wing. But look at ending slavery. Let's talk about ending slavery here. Listen, the United States was the last country to end slavery. In fact, the only reason for the Revolutionary War to separate itself from England was already ending slavery. In fact, the United States only wanted to keep slavery here, which is why they fought the Revolutionary War. Period. So the South, the 3/5 of a person, that's the North and the South right there. And you're right, the South wanted to keep every black person given the equal vote, because then they would tell those black people how to vote and to vote for their slavery. Let's just get that straight as well. Also, as far as slavery is concerned, as it take the position that you are for the black people, or for, I'm not black, by the way, but I'm just saying, I'm for black people not to be enslaved. I'm for the empowerment of black people, but yet in the same breath, denigrate BLM and other movements today that are trying to save black people's lives. They're trying to actually bring light to the subject matter of the plight of black people in this country, because they're the only minority, might I have. There have been generations of immigrants coming into this country that don't go through what black people have gone through in this country, and that is an issue that we need to look at. And ignoring it and disregarding it is just simply not an option. And I'm just gonna have one last thing you said about China, and you bring up China as if it's like it's communist. I'm sorry, China is capitalist and communist, which is why they're the #1 economy in the world. Yes, a communist country has the #1 economy in the world. Everything that we buy, everything that you see on this screen that you're wearing, that's in your truck, that's behind Marcus, was made there, because we have got rid of all our manufacturing jobs. That's just the nature of the game. And the thinking from the right wing of this old school mentality of bringing jobs back, manufacturing jobs back, I'm sure you agree with that, right? Sorry, that's not going to happen. Get out of that framework. The manufacturing jobs are gone. Labor-intensive jobs are gone. And this is the forward thinking that conservatives don't have. I'm sorry, bro. My last thing. Because we need to think about where we're placing our individuals. You mentioned how crappy our schools are. I'm sorry, but California universities are the best in the world. Better than Harvard, better than Yale. Those are junk schools. You can buy your way in, as you see in the recent news articles. The best schools in the world that people from around the world come to, right here in California. Sorry, Marcus. Go ahead, buddy.
Hello. Actually, I was going to point out for a moment. First, I was going to ask, what did any of that have to do with California's lack of representation in the federal government.
Thank you.
The
Thank
second
you.
thing I was gonna bring up was the 3/5 compromise had nothing to do with voting. It was about representatives it was about how many representatives were going to be allowed in the House of Representatives. It wasn't racist for the North to say 3/5. It was a bloody compromise to allow that to basically, because the southern states wanted, although they didn't want them to vote or have rights, they wanted to use them to stuff Congress with as many representatives as possible. That's the only historical. I'm not going to go into Cortez or what have you. Believe me, I probably know more about Cortez than you do, brother. I'm not going to go into that. The truth of the matter is, it's like the morality of that time period. The racial basis of that is really not. Yeah, it's really kind of undeniable. I mean, there have been great books written left and right that nobody reads, or very few people read, discussing either side of it. It's like, there's a great book by this guy that you probably haven't read because he hasn't been published anywhere but in right-wing press or left-wing press. And if we want to go into that, it's like you can find an opinion to match anything you want to do. But but to get back on it, it's like California as an independent nation, it's got to be up, as with any true nation on earth, it needs to be up to the populace, the people of that nation, to determine what the morality of that nation will be. Because that is the only moral answer. Based on 200-year-old ideals, someone else's ideals, or to say that it's going to careen off the rails, you don't know that. You have no way to predict that. You can say that this guy wrote a book, but that's not necessarily true. And how else would you do it? How else would you predict it? California has a progressive split. It's undeniable. It's in and both left and right polls show this. The elections show this. The RNC put out numbers. It's like, and I would argue with your numbers about people supporting splitting California, where basically only about 23% of the RNC's latest numbers remain conservative in California. At that point, splitting off half of the state to be a conservative homeland, I don't think you have the numbers.
Yeah, in fact, do we get to ask him questions?
No, I'm setting up to ask questions.
Yeah, so let's go back to Ryan for a response for a few minutes, or Nina, and then yes, Shankar, we'll come back to you and you can ask questions. I also have some questions from the audience. Professor Williams, I saw your questions. If you want questions asked and you are not Shankar or Hal, type them in the chat and I will make sure they're asked. Okay? That's what we're doing.
And thank you for that, Marcus. And really quickly, too, to the points that Shankar was saying, and I know this kind of might be a little bit off the topic of the debate, but I think, a lot of these individually have to be addressed, because if they're just accepted in the public forum and not subjected to critical review, that could be damaging long term. So let's talk about first Black Lives Matter, right? You got 3 lesbian founders who are clearly Marxists. They admit as much from their own mouths. We know that Marxism has killed 100 million in the past century. We know who funded Marxism originally. We know that Jacob Schiff trained Trotsky at his New York mansion, that he gave him 20 million in gold to commit the biggest robbery in history, to murder the Tsar of Russia, who had 30 billion at the time. We know that Mao was funded by these same Wall Street bankers. And I don't know how many of us have studied the Talmud, but it's not the Torah. It's a totally different animal, and I would recommend studying it. And this is not anti-Semitic. It is a different idea. You got 3 Abrahamic religions, right? You got Islam, you got Judaism, and you got Christianity. Of those 3, Islam and Judaism have moral codes where their own are given more favorable treatment than outsiders. Christianity alone is the one that the golden rule is not just a Christian. It doesn't say treat others well as you want to be treated only if they're a Christian. That is not what Christianity says. So these are just basic overviews, which are undeniable and undisputable. Nobody's going to. I mean, if you look at Judaism in the Old Testament, Islam under Muhammad, we see quite a bit of bloodshed. And people will say that Christianity committed bloodshed too, but you never find Jesus doing it, and you never find it commended in the New Testament. So going back to Black Lives Matter, I want to be very clear that that movement is communist in nature, that 147 corporations gave 150 million to it, of which not one dime of that is made into the undeveloped or under supported. I'm sorry?
Why are we going back to Black Lives Matter when it has nothing to do with
well, I find it extremely disturbing that anybody accepts the credibility of Black Lives Matter. That is disturbing, because that organization
we haven't
poses one of
posed
the greatest threats.
Sir, I would disagree with you. I would like to disagree that we haven't posed the premise that we give them credibility or not in this debate.
Okay. I just want to be sure, because if that's accepted, that really calls into question every single logical assumption of the person who accepts that. But so, anyways, on the California, you brought up, I think, Hal, that morality, and that the morality of the people should be able to determine their own morality. Well, Cicero was very clear that there's a morality that transcends votes, it transcends political leaders, it transcends courts and judges. That morality is going to be moral no matter what any of us say, think, or do. It is what it is. Either we follow that morality and we learn from the past, or as Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park, said, he said, if you don't know history, you don't know anything at all. You're like a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. And this is where, the knowledge of history and in-depth history is extremely important. Now, personally, I've never owned a television. I have a 5,000 volume library. I read extensively. And 2 years ago, I found out pretty much all I read all my entire life was, a lot of it was disinformation. So it was a jarring assumption revelation for me. But I do think I don't see any civilization in human history is going to be able to survive without morality. The founders knew this as well. They knew history and the Bible far better than we do. That's a fact. And humility, I think, is also necessary to be successful, because if we're not aware of our own faults, pride leads to destruction. That's true individually, and it's true societally. It happened to Greece. It happened to Rome. It happened to Hitler. It happened to the communists, and it will happen to us. And so I think it's extremely important. I'll end with this. 1934, J.D. Unwin, a British agnostic anthropologist, he studied the 86 greatest societies in human history, and he found they had two principles in common. Number one, they had no sex before marriage. Number two, they had no sex outside of heterosexual marriage. Every single society in human history that left that dynamic, and it could be argued that Greece and Rome did, and yes, they did on their way down. Everyone that left that on the third generation collapsed. We're on the third generation right now. I'll end with that.
Actually, I would ask you the question. It's like, are you equating Christianity and morality, and saying that without Christianity there is no morality?
I'm definitely stating that I know of no other objective morality that is superior to the Bible, and I would say the King James Version Bible. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, as a Catholic school survivor myself, who basically has read the Douay Bible from cover to cover to cover for most of my schooling life, I like your Reader's Digest version of the Bible, but missing some books there, babe. But I'm not going to get. I didn't want to get into a biblical. But getting into a biblical discussion would probably take us way off the rails.
Yeah.
What I'm asking about is that to basically, I mean, from a California exit standpoint, or a California independence standpoint, decline to state is the fastest growing religion in California. I mean, this is sort of polling wise. I'm left, right, and center. This is the truth of it. I can't necessarily agree with you on the idea that Christianity is the only blueprint for morality. Those societies you say that collapsed and what have you, yes, they sure did. Greek society collapsed after 500 years. The Roman Empire did collapse after hundreds and hundreds of years. Mostly through economic, not necessarily through moral. I mean, you can equate morality to that, but the argument would be economics. From a California independence standpoint, again, I'm gonna go back, 5th largest economy on earth. We would be unleashing that, and an independent California, the amount of money that will become available to run California as a nation would basically double what we have now if we were not into the federal system. I don't see that economic collapse. Now, if you're talking about a moral collapse, I believe that may be subjective. It's a prediction. It's basically prognostication, if nothing else. But that would be my question. It's like, and I'd like to pose to you, if I may, is that part of the basic premise of New California and your stance?
Good question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You asked what is the basic premise? How
Christianity is that one of the basic pillars, premises of New California? Because I'm looking at it going, with fewer and fewer people basically adopting Christianity. I mean, it's one of those, are we pinning a new state on a dying idea?
Good question.
Well, so I mean, Christianity has ebbed and flowed constantly. It's been under persecution for 2,000 years. If you look back under the Roman emperors, I mean, Nero put the Apostle Paul, pretty much all the apostles, to death. And yet Edward Gibbon, who was no fan of Christianity, said that Christianity destroyed the Roman Empire. So what it is, Christianity it's going to be under attack, but the problem is the Christian church in America today is a far cry from what the Christian church in 1776 was. So if you actually study the Old and New Testament and you apply that to your life and you live it, what you would have, first of all, no Democrat would be in office. 80% of Republicans would not be in office. Donald Trump would not be in office. We would have a totally new political landscape. But William Penn, who started Pennsylvania, he said, those who are not governed by God will be ruled by tyrants. And I ask you, is that not what we have right now? It appears to me that's exactly what we have. No. And there's a couple of other quotes from Thomas Jefferson. He says, it is in the manners and spirit of a people which preserve a republican vigor. Degeneracy in these is a canker which soon eats into the heart of its laws and constitution. Another quote from Patrick Henry. Virtue is a word we don't hear anymore. Virtue and wisdom, yet the founders knew those two words well. Virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, my friend, and this alone that renders us invincible. These are the tactics we should study. If we lose these, we are conquered, fallen indeed. So long as our manners and principles remain sound, there is no danger. That was Patrick Henry. John Adams said, it is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand. The only foundation of a free constitution is pure virtue. And the final quote here is from Sam Adams. Neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. He therefore is the truest friend of the liberty of his country, who tries most to promote its virtue, and who, so far as his power and influence extend, will not suffer a man to be chosen into any office of power and trust who is not a wise and virtuous man. And actually, I'm going to end with this. Every one of us has probably used the Noah Webster dictionary. Well, Noah Webster wrote this: in selecting men for office, let principle be your guide. Regard not the particular sect or denomination of the candidate, look at his character. It is alleged by men of loose principles or defective views of the subject that religion and morality are not necessary or important qualifications for political stations. But the scriptures teach a different doctrine. They direct that rulers should be men who rule in the fear of God, men of truth, hating covetousness. It is to be the neglect of this rule that we must ascribe the multiplied frauds, breaches of trust, speculations, and embezzlements of public property, which astonish even ourselves, which tarnish the character of our country, and which disgrace our government. When a citizen gives his vote to a man of known immorality, he abuses his civic responsibility. He not only sacrifices his own responsibility, he sacrifices not only his own interest, but that of his neighbor. He betrays the interest of his country, and that's all.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate that. Real quick, sorry, I know we're going to go to Shankar and Hal. Couple housekeeping things because I'm getting blown up with chat messages. So I have to take a phone call real quick for 5 minutes. Hal, I'm going to let you moderate. There are apparently some very upset Yes, Shankar, I see you. We will get to you in 1 second. There's a couple things I have to do because I got people yelling and screaming at me. So I'm going to take a phone call and get yelled at by some of the liberals who felt that I endorsed anti-Semitism and am a anti-Semite and normalized anti-Semitism because I allowed New California on over here. So apparently I hate Jews and I'm all about it. So some of our members are convinced of that now. I don't, but you know, hey, Ryan, I'll let you on. So just to let you know, brother,
hello, Ryan.
It's gonna hurt me bad. So I'm gonna
take well, I'll tell you right now, nothing I said is anti-Semitic at all.
You know, and I already said, yeah, but brother, I already said we don't share values at the beginning. So there's no reason for anyone to accuse me of nothing. I already said being on the same page day one right away. So
I'll tell you, those who have said what I said is anti-Semitic, I will warn them that they're opening themselves up for a libel lawsuit because I hope they have a lot of money because I'll clean them out because I'm not anti-Semitic.
Okay, got it. So I need to read a question because one person, yes, Shankar, please leave me 30 seconds to get through a couple things, sir.
I'll go right to you, Shankar, in a moment.
Okay, so the one question from the person who actually followed direction was from Professor Williams. He submitted a question. Like we told everybody, if they wanted to talk to New California, submit a question to me. We would ask the question. So here's the one question I was asked. New California, would you be open to a real estate relocation pact? Basically something along the lines of conservatives want to leave California and move to conservative areas. Perhaps liberals in conservative areas want to move to liberal areas. Would you be open theoretically to some sort of loose partnership in some sort of way where we say, hey, you're conservative, you want to move to conservative areas, we'll help you. And if liberals are in your conservative area and they want to move here with us, you'd say, hey, we'll help you out. Are you open to that idea? Before you answer, I got to take a phone call. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Hal, Ryan's going to answer, then it goes to you, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus. And so, yeah, as Professor Williams asked, we're not going to be like Germany, where you had East and West Germany partitioned, and people from East Germany and the Communist Party could not come to West Germany. That's not going to happen. Whatever you want to, we're very confident, though, if we get rid of the income tax, which we fully intend on doing, and we get rid of regulations and really open up the economy, that first of all, California is bankrupt right now. They don't have enough money. They ran out of money a long time ago. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a new economy, and it's going to be so successful that people are going to be falling all over themselves to come here. It's very little different from when America started. You know, people from the old world were coming over here in mass because they realized the opportunities that they had were so great. That's what they wanted it. It's going to be the exact same thing with New California, because what this is going to do is we're going to undo what happened when Woodrow Wilson was elected in 1912. The following year, in 1913, he set up the income tax, 13th Amendment, the Federal Reserve, and direct election of senators. And that was by the bankers to stifle competition. So we're going to undo all that. We're going to undo FDR's, his Social Security, his New Deal, which all that was basically stifling competition to allow the bankers to control everything. We're going to undo all of that. We're going to undo JFK's Great Frontier. We're going to undo LBJ's War on Poverty. All that stuff, every Democrat president, all that has done. This is why Democrat cities today have the highest rates of crime, poverty, and homelessness anywhere. We're going to undo all that. And when people get free opportunity, then guess what? It's like we don't have equal outcomes. We have equal opportunity. So if I'm going to sit here and I abuse drugs and I party and I don't work, yeah, I'm going to be a failure. And I have no right, regardless of my skin color, to turn around and say that some other person no longer gets. Is that my time right there?
Well, you said you were going to take a minute to respond.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead. I didn't know my time was up. I didn't know I had a time limit.
Shankar, you want to chime in?
Yes, finally. So look, this is going to be the last thing I'm going to say to you, sir, because there's like a bank of people that want to get to say something. And listen, I don't think you're anti-Semitic at all, right? But look, I will say this, and then I'm gonna address I'll address the economic questions first. So look at this is the CalExit movement. This is the California independence movement. We've done our homework. We know how California is going to survive. Do you know what the combined GDP for all the counties that you're proposing to separate itself? Do you know what the combined GDP happens to be by any chance? Just a yes or no.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. You're not even sure what the GDP. So just to let you know real quick, because Jefferson is included in where you're slicing the state, correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
So parts of Jefferson, I'm sure. I don't know if you got in the entire thing, but Jefferson alone, their GDP contribution to the state of California. Now we're a $2.3 trillion economy, okay, to California alone. Jefferson's contribution to that is less than $3 billion for the 21 counties that make up Jefferson. Now, I saw the map of where you had drawn New California. Those counties contribute not even close to another $1 billion. So with less than $4 billion as a new state, the next state to come up above you as far as GDP is Vermont with $30 billion. So Vermont is on the lowest of all the states at $30 billion. And then would come your state with less than $4 billion, which is not enough money to function as a state. You most likely you'd be in abject poverty because you have no welfare system or most of the welfare recipients, believe it or not, a lot of your constituents are on the government dole, and you will not have the state to bear that brunt anymore. Just FYI, we've crunched the numbers. We've known the stat. You didn't know the stat of the GDP of the state that you're combining. You'd think that would be a little thing you want to score up before you put this. And then one more thing I just want to mention real quick, because I don't think I'm gonna get another chance to speak. Listen, dude, the reason why this movement is happening is to get away from people with your mindset. Because people with your mindset is exactly why the United States is in its position it's in right now. And what position would that be? Well, it's got about 20% unemployment. The stock market is a communist stock market. It gets bailed out $1 trillion every single day. And people in Wall Street are happy, go lucky that they're doing so great while people on Main Street are doing like crap. And nobody's asking that reason why. And it's because it's corrupt. And it's corrupt down to the core. And you wanting to stay a part of that corruption is part of the problem for us. We do not want to be part of that anymore. We can't stop it. If you think you can stop it, great. Also, one more thing is about China. You keep harping on this communist thing. Listen, bro, I got news. There is no such thing as communism, man. It's a nice little theory thought up by some dude in the 19th century, man. People have tried. They failed many, many times. China right now, if you think is a communist country, then there's a very successful communist country. But I'll have you know one thing. Learn Mandarin, son. Please. We're all going to have to learn Mandarin soon. That is the new powerhouse. China. Get used to it. And with that, look, my last offer to you, and just to save face, and so you can go back to your people and say, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I work with Black Lives Matter for 3 years now. I know all of them personally. I would like to invite you to a BLM event, and they have them every week. You're in California, I'm in California. You can be my guest. Nothing's going to happen to you. And I want you to see for yourself with your own eyes what happens at a BLM event. And then you tell me if you think they're the Marxist terrorists or what they are. Please. That invitation is open to you, my friend. Please be the man that you are. Be the brave Christian that you are and accept my offer. And you know what, man? I know a great place to eat afterwards. After BLM, we can go grab some awesome barbecue. It's called Mom's Barbecue. And it is fantastic. We'll go get a bite to eat afterwards, and we'll discuss our findings about BLM. And that's all I got to say. I hope you accept my invitation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shankar. Actually, I'm going to go a little further on this one, if I may. I've read the 95. I've read the websites. I've gone through it. Anti-Semitic, I don't know. Anti-immigration, I do know. About 60% of the grievances are anti-immigration. Basically saying that immigrants are dangerous and abusive, and all of the words that align it with basically constitutional reasons for leaving the country. I have to say, it's a lot of for a movement that is not aligning itself racially. That's a lot of emphasis on brown people. I've also looked at your maps, and it does. Those maps do make me nervous, sir. I have to. I'll tell you right now, because they do make me wonder here in beautiful Long Beach, which is where I'm from. Your new California is going to control all the water. That might be I have to tell you, people who live in the old California would probably not go for this very well. They would probably find that to be a little hard to swallow, because of course they'll be terribly parched. I don't know if your new California and the old California can coexist. It's like, can you speak to that?
No, there's no way it is going to coexist. Now, Victor Davis Hanson, who I would argue is one of the two best historians living alive in America today, he wrote a great article on what is happening with water in California. In the 1960s, there was this 3-stage plan to upgrade the water infrastructure in California when we had a population of 20 million people. We now have double that population. We have 40 million people in California, and only stage 2 has been done. The 3rd stage has not been done. The money has been wasted. So the road infrastructure is still basically the same from the 1960s. So we have infrastructure that was built for 20 million, supporting 40 million people. So of course, climate change and all the other hoaxes they come up with to explain away their incompetence at not keeping up with the population growth. As far as immigration is concerned, we love legal immigration. If people are going to come here legally. But the key word here is assimilation. When you come here, people want the opportunities that America offers, but they don't want to do the work necessary to learn what values were necessary to make those opportunities available to people from other countries. So if you're going to come here, don't bring the third world dysfunction that you came from here and think that voting for that and instituting that here is going to work. It's not going to work. There's going to be a massive clash. I also wanted to speak to Shankar's point. I've met with Black Lives. I am in the most diverse city in America. No city in America is more diverse than the city that I was raised in and currently live in. It's Vallejo, California. We're about a quarter white, a quarter black, a quarter Asian, and a quarter Latino. No city is more diverse. I went to schools where the white population was 10%. So I am well accustomed. And I've learned recently, matter of fact, I read a quote from a communist in 1912. His name was Israel Cohen. It's not a hoax. I would recommend not using Google and Wikipedia because they're going to send you down a rabbit hole. But he specifically said that the ideology of the communists, called a racial program for the 20th century, their goal, and we see that on this call too, was to make whites feel guilty for their quote unquote privilege and blacks to feel resentful and angry over their past enslavement. And thereby the communists intended to use the black community as muscle for their revolution, which is what Black Lives Matter is right now.
So would you come and meet? I mean, I'm talking about meeting Patricia Cullors, Miss Abdullah. Would you come to a meeting and see what it's really about?
As long as you can assure my safety, I've already almost been lynched. I haven't threatened harm to anybody, but I've already almost suffered violence.
Of course. No. Nothing, of course nothing will happen to you.
You'll be my guest.
Be with me. You can hold my hand.
I had to sleep with a Glock by my bed. These people are violent. I haven't threatened nobody.
Will you come to a Black Lives Matter meeting with me?
As long as you assure my safety, I'd be happy. Of
course.
To. I have no.
Right.
I don't, like as Lincoln said, I have charity for all.
Let's set that date up.
I don't hate you.
We'll set that date. Let's set that date.
Yeah.
We'll set that date.
Okay. Yeah. I look forward to
That'll put an end to. Let's not talk about it anymore. I think that right there would put an end to any disagreements we have about that. So.
Actually, can I go back to a point for a moment? You said you don't feel there's any way that there is any way that the two can coexist?
No, I mean, what's happening right now, I mean, Jefferson, I think, or Franklin said that rebellion against tyranny is obedience to God. What's going on right now is tyranny. And the idea that we all have equal opportunity. I've been banned on Facebook for 2 years, banned on Facebook or on Twitter for a year. The tech companies control what all of us see and think and say. And as a result, that's brainwashing. I mean, we all should know. You read 1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. You know about idea suppression, and that's what's happening. Every single American, you know, my free speech rights are infringed upon. Guess what? Every single one of the 330 million people in America, your free speech rights are endangered as well. The key to free speech is not to hear ideas that you like. Hitler and Stalin were perfectly in favor of ideas they liked. The idea of free speech is to hear ideas you don't like to hear. That's the whole point of free speech. You know, the founders understood that Socrates and Jesus were killed by people who didn't want to listen to what they had to say, so they killed them. So they wanted to ensure that if someone told the truth in America, their right to speak their truth was not able to be infringed upon, and to make it doubly certain, they followed the First Amendment with the Second Amendment. So they said, if you take my First Amendment, I now have a gun and I can defend my First Amendment.
I don't even want to begin to open the Second Amendment discussion, because if we open that one up, we will literally be here all day.
Do you believe in the Second Amendment or no?
Actually, no, I don't. I don't believe in it. I believe that it should be. I believe that it should be regulated. It should be regulated basically on a county by county basis.
Yeah.
No other nation on it. And to say whether I believe in the Second Amendment or not is one of those. I don't know of any other nation on earth that actually has a quote unquote Second Amendment, except America's, except the United States. So I believe it's there. I do believe in it. It is there. It does exist. I don't know if it.
And dude, I'm more pro Second Amendment than you.
Fits into the modern world. But I was actually going to go into a different zone here, if I may. The thing about tyranny, talking about tyranny, it's like I hear this a lot from what we kind of loosely refer to as red California. And I don't want to address the United States because, to be honest, it's like I have no control over the rest of the United States. We have no ability to reach them. Honestly, and this is not meant as a dig, but I've looked at the numbers. In Jefferson, in particular, has the reddest counties in California, and the reddest county in California is only 65% conservative.
You said 65%. Well, what is that?
65% conservative. It's 35%. It's 35%, basically, for lack of a better term. I don't normally like to do this. It's 35% blue. Its population, according to the last vote in 2018, only 6,000 people voted there. So what you have is you have a sort of situation where a very small population is claiming a very broad area as being very, very red, and you need to look at these people. It's like, but if you look at the numbers in Sacramento, they are receiving the representation that they deserve by population and by vote. They are receiving the money they deserve by basically their tax records. The system is equitable. It is on target, and it's exactly what the founding fathers would have put out there. In fact, actually, the California state government is almost a mirror image of the federal government. We have the same houses. We have the same houses, the same legislative bodies generally. Smaller, yes, but generally the same. Now, as opposed to like Santa Monica, which voted 80% blue in the last election and had well on nigh to 100,000 votes. I would put it to you that what's happened, this is not about representation, and this is not about the rights of these people in these areas being infringed upon. They're getting exactly what the founding fathers would have said they should get. by population, by vote, by representation. It is a representative republic. It is happening exactly the way it was designed. Fewer people are getting less of a vote because democracy is based on majority rule.
Yeah.
Codified majority rule. If 80% of the country goes one way and 20% goes the other, there is no excuse whatsoever in there for that 20% to basically punch above their weight class. And the jury, I'm sorry, but I've let you talk minute after minute after minute. What you propose, and I've read your site. I've also read your plan for government. 1 vote for the state senate and 2 for the state assembly from each district. What you would set up sir, is basically 2 senates that would ignore population and population density in favor of a big R republic. Basically, what it would do is it would allow the rural, small, tiny areas like in Jefferson that aren't necessarily, that are going more blue by the day and less religious, to punch vastly above their socioeconomic weight class. It would basically codify it so that the numbers of districts or counties would be the telling factor, not the population. It purposely, and I read this, moves away from the idea of democratic rule towards a republic that is based on minority rule. Basically, what we have, what independent California and the California exit movement is fighting desperately against on the national level. The reason we're leaving is because we don't get representation. You would codify that within California and force, basically allowing the rural red superstitious members of the state, the most superstitious backwards members of the state. Basically, I mean, I've heard everything you've said, and I'm sorry, but it's getting to me. You want to throw back to the 1700s or the 1800s. You talk about these books that people read. Oh, this guy wrote a great book. It's like, does anybody but you think it was a great book? I mean, the real deal comes off. It's like just sheer numbers. I'm not going to argue with you about Semitism, racism. I'm not going to talk to you about Black Lives Matter. Just numbers, math. You, sir, represent a shrinking population, both religiously and politically. California wishes to do what California wishes to do based on the people of what amounts to the vast majority of the people of California. And we as an independence movement see that as not being able to happen within the confines of the United States that does not allow us representation. I believe I've read your site, I've read your grievances, I've read your plans. You have every right to feel that way. You have every right to feel like your way of life or the way you think it should be is going away. Because it kind of is.
Yep.
It kind of is. Just by the numbers, it is going away. But it's going away because of organic means. The people of California have rejected this and are in greater numbers every year rejecting this. I mean, the Republican Party from 2016 to 2020 has gone from 28% to 23%. You're on the verge of winking out. And to basically say, well, now we're going to take a part of the country because we can't get our way anymore. You're pulling a Cartman, babe. We're taking your ball and going home.
I'm going to see something just to
it's like, that's where I'm at. It's like, that's where I'm at, and I'm going to yield the floor from that point.
I just want to make one point to complement what Hal just said real quick. And just so you don't bring this subject matter up again as a point for your argument, I've heard we have the highest poverty level, the highest income inequality, the highest rate of homelessness. I just want to ask you, compared to who? Because we're $3 trillion. If there's another state with a 40 million population do $3 trillion, let's see what their numbers are. Because until that happens, please don't compare us to Wyoming. Please don't compare us to Arizona. Please don't compare us to Nebraska. You can't. They have nothing on us. Those states don't produce anything. They do nothing. They haven't done anything for the past 50 years. Compare us to Canada. Compare us to Australia. Compare us to other developed nations, because that's what we are. We have the 5th largest economy in the world alone. You have to respect that. You can't disregard it. Our poverty level is right on par with the rest of the nations of the world. Our income inequality is right on par with the rest of the world. With a little beady state like maybe I don't know Kentucky, which has one of the poorest states. You want to compare us to Kentucky? If you can tell me what Kentucky's done in the past 50 years to improve the significance of mankind in any way, please let me know. Because as far as I can tell, they haven't done anything. And neither has the rest of the 49. So please, don't compare us to the 49 states. Compare us to other countries. Okay, that's all I got to say. That's to compliment what Hal just said.
Okay, and so I wanted to address too the idea that we have a huge economy and so that makes us superior. Our economy is on the backs of 1.4 billion Chinese slaves. And for the people who don't think China is problematic, I would recommend you go take yourself to China, go criticize the government, and when they break every single bone in your body, then come back to America and appreciate our Christian heritage. That's what I would tell you.
Dude,
so slavery was fine in the South, but it's not good in China?
Dude, we actually...
I mean, it's the truth. I mean, you act like China is good. You can't do what you do here in China.
Dude, it doesn't matter if they're good or not, bro. They're an economic fact. You're going to have to deal with them. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. I don't care what you think about them. As far as
but the thing is, the owners of today's Democrat Party, which are the invisible government, the Federal Reserve,
are a joke.
They control China too. They're playing us off against each other. You can't fall for the game. It's a game. China is enslaved by the same people who enslave us. Capitalism and communism are two sides of the same coin. You're on the Black Lives Matter communist side. You're criticizing the capitalist side, which is supposedly Republican. You're fighting the same person. You're not really fighting anything.
Dude, I don't believe in communism, bro.
If you really want to fight, we all rise up, all races. We take the 5,000 owners of the Federal Reserve. We shoot them. Your Black Lives Matter collapses immediately. The media collapses. The schools collapse. Because that's who's behind it. It's not a
Dude, you know, hey, I told you not to bring up BLM anymore, right? And you disrespected me by doing that.
Hey, the whole purpose of a discussion is for people to say controversial things. If you can't do that,
yeah, but we agreed. But we agreed. Is your word not good?
Right. Actually, man.
We agreed on that. Is your word not good?
Ryan, would it be all right? Would it be all right with you to open the floor to others, to other people's questions?
Sure. Go ahead.
Because I know the professor's been waiting patiently, and I'm sure others.
Yeah, I appreciate his patience.
Dude, you're about to get massacred, bro. Get your hat on. Get your armor on, bro. Get your armor on, dude. And I'll defend you, too. I'll help you, man.
At this time, those who wish to ask questions, let's try to stay as succinct as possible.
Dude, I'll protect you like I'll protect you at BLM, bro.
Okay, I can go.
Thank you for your patience, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Ryan, I really do appreciate your good words about the study of history. Since I'm a historian, thanks for the plug. There was a very well-respected book published by a Yale historian named Paul Kennedy called The Decline of Empires. And he looked at all kinds of different factors that led to the decline and collapse of empires throughout history. And he covered, from ancient times on to the present, all kinds of different empires. And he looked at all kinds of different factors. And guess what he found was the most common factor by far as to why empires collapsed. And what he found was that it was because as they expanded, they invested so much of their resources and their economic forces and their money and finances into an expanded military that eventually the economy could not tolerate the support of such a large military, and the whole thing collapsed. And it collapsed like a house of cards very suddenly. And what happened to the Soviet Union in 1991 is the perfect example. When empires collapse, they go pretty quickly. Okay, so in the California independence movement, we are trying to take historical findings like that and suggest what might our policies be that we could do better than, say, what's occurring in the United States for the present. So let me ask you, when you were listing the problems that you saw in society today, I didn't hear anything about alcohol or alcoholism. What's your attitude about that?
You know, we have 50,000 deaths every single year from drunk drivers. So I think that's entirely too many. Whether or not we should bring back the 18th Amendment, which actually was a success, contrary to popular opinion today, you know, that's debatable. I would say that drugs are more of a concern right now because of the long-term effect. And I mean, just going back to China, they for the longest time resisted trade. And when they brought opium in, because British basically forced it down, the British East India Company forced it down their throat, they collapsed.
I'm well aware of that.
And didn't get rid of opium until Mao started brutally murdering people, and 60 million died under the Cultural Revolution.
Okay.
So for alcohol, I'm you know, I personally have never used alcohol. Whether mandating people not use alcohol, I think once we deal with these first three issues, I would be in a much better position to see whether or not what position needs to be taken on that. At the moment, I am not for prohibition, but I do think a rational person would see plenty of good reasons for it.
Okay.
I would just like to back up his point.
Can I jump in real quick?
Excuse me. Let me follow up on that. The reason I asked about that is because, as you know, the 18th Amendment did make alcohol illegal. And whether you think so or not, historians are in quite big agreement that prohibition was a total failure. It just simply was not effective. No, it was not. Again, I'll use Hal's thing and talk about the numbers. It was not effective and it was repealed. Okay, so now we are faced with an issue like drugs, like pornography, things like this. Tell me how you think that making these illegal is going to get people not to do it. What are you going to do? Are you going to throw people in prison for engaging in this kind of behavior? If so, we've already been doing that since the 1970s in both sex and drugs. It hasn't worked. So how do you intend to have a program that you
waiting for my turn?
These are your top issues.
Sure, and I appreciate the question, Professor Williams. What I would start off with is saying I saw a video of a YouTube Jewish rabbi, and he was telling them that, hey, you know the first two laws that Hitler made, they were to ban interest and to ban pornography in Germany. This is from a Jewish rabbi saying this, and the Jewish rabbi proceeded to say that, hey, don't complain because when the Jews leave God, God always punishes them. So a Jewish rabbi is saying this. I'm not making this stuff up. And what you have to understand, I mean, 1960, porn, abortion, homosexuality, and contraception were all illegal in America. If you go and study exactly what forces were behind the legalization of all four of those, you find the exact same culprits: the ACLU, the NAACP, the SPLC, the Anti-Defamation League. The same forces that are funded by these bankers are behind all of that. Now, why do the bankers?
Okay, but then how are you going, if you're going to make all those things illegal, how are you going to enforce that? How are you going to get people not to do those kinds of things?
Sure.
One question.
So let's begin with pornography. So 1969, Stanley versus Georgia, that's when it was legalized by the Supreme Court. However, I think like 60 to 80% of everything online, your Pornhub, all that stuff, 60 to 80% of that is owned by a company called MindGeek. If you target the distributors, the entire empire collapses. Women are not going to be doing porn if they're not getting paid for it, or a man's not going to brutalize them into it. They're not going to do it.
Wait. So much of porn is amateur stuff that people are putting up, even teenagers are putting up naked pictures of themselves and having sex and all this. This is a massive movement by.
Sure, it really is.
It's not controlled by a few people.
The very fact that you have a law, because the thing, what's often happens is liberty is often mistaken for libertinism, a word that we don't use much anymore, but we should bring back in vogue. Now, what libertinism is, and it's a sign of a dysfunctional person in a nation, a libertine is someone who has no sexual self-control.
Okay, but I want to know, how are you going to prohibit these things? You said,
come on,
I'm sorry?
Legal. How?
How am I going to what?
How are you going to, you said you're going to make them illegal. So how are you going to get people not to do these things?
Dude,
Okay, so
Taliban.
already, there's a woman, she's here in California. I can't think of her name at the moment, but she already has a petition with millions of signatures to ban Pornhub. There's already 2 movements, National Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation and
You can't ban it.
drugs, that are already underway to ban pornography. And
You're not
they've
answering
got
his question.
following.
Answer his question,
I'm sorry?
bro. Answer his question. Banning it is fine. Ban it all you want, but how are you going to enforce that? You're never going to be able to. That's his point.
Well, so I mean, what once was can again be. And if we just
How
did
do
it
you know that?
50 years
How do you
ago,
know that?
we could do it again.
How do you
When?
can be again? When
was it banned? It was never.
Hold. May I ask,
Sure.
what does this have? So you would do this in New California?
Yeah,
There's many people that are on board with this. Absolutely.
I don't believe.
Not 100% of people agree with me. Let me
Yeah,
be very clear.
I don't see the mechanism for this. I don't see the mechanism for this taking hold in California in general, or New California in particular. I'm not sure if that how that relates to the desirability of a New California.
Okay.
You said how it relates to. I didn't hear the last.
Well, if we want to talk about every current event possible, we'll be, as I said before, we'll be here all day.
So, I'm convinced those 3 factors, and I've got the data to support it. Those 3 factors impair the reasoning abilities of Americans the most of anything that we're dealing with today. So that's why I try and hone in so much on those. I mean, if in 1812, less than 1% of America was functionally illiterate. And I'm not going to address slavery. I'm just talking about the voting public at that time. Today, half of America is functionally illiterate, and these people are voting. That's problematic. I don't have a problem.
No way. That's bullshit.
I don't have a problem someone differs.
There's no way.
I would ask you if under normal debate rules, I would ask you to prove that to
Yeah, you can't just say shit like that. That's totally false, man.
Oh,
Wyoming is completely populated with unicorns.
I'll text you the data.
1% of the population.
If I can't prove it, the statement doesn't carry a lot of weight.
Come on, dude.
But
I mean, everything that I'm saying, on my website, I have the hard data. Now, you have to read a lot more than you currently do, but it's up to you. Are you going to do the work?
Well, I've taken the last few days to read entirely the New California website to prepare for this.
That's good.
So I do. If you haven't noticed, I have read and gone into the weeds to a certain degree. I'm not necessarily opposed to doing so. But if we're going, I was more the purpose of the debate, and we're now reaching that point where we're getting kind of into the long shank of the discussion.
Well, in other words, the point I was trying to make is that it seems like the kinds of laws that you are proposing, I don't see happening in California. Maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe Qatar, okay, maybe
Professor, I agree with you.
Places, but not California.
Professor, I agree with you. As I pointed.
Well, the argument often will be made that we can't afford a police state. I would argue we can't afford the morality we have right now. Do you know how much we have to pay out as a society for porn, drugs, and television? It's trillions. We can't afford to continue in these lifestyles.
Okay.
We can't do it. It's actually cheaper to ban porn and drugs than it is to legalize them, and I have the hard data on that.
Okay, and can we afford to not to be the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't provide universal health care for people? I mean, you can take a whole bunch of subjects.
We're back in the weeds.
So and on that, Professor,
Can I ask
I
a
would
question?
say,
All right,
Can I ask a question?
Basically,
okay.
yes, Marcus.
Oh, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Hal. Just a quick statement from the membership we wanted me to give real quick, and then I had a question from the audience. Got to respond to statements and questions from the audience. So, Ryan, I have been requested to make this statement just so it's overwhelmingly clear that the California independence movement fundamentally rejects the assumptions that you're making, its fundamental assumptions, and we want to make that clear for our followers. Yes, I already stated that, brother, but welcome to being a liberal. Also, I'm also here to inform you on behalf of our liberal members that we feel that lower taxes and lower regulation is a good idea, but that you unnecessarily wed them to items of bigotry. You don't have to agree. I have been required to make the statement. Now I've made it. Now I can move on to the question. Here's a question for you. New California is complaining about high taxes and high regulation in California. As an ex-Republican, I certainly agree. Would you agree, though, sir, that given that California is a donor state, and that given that Californians pay more in federal income taxes than state income taxes, and that there is a federal regulatory layer on top of a California layer, that I'm not asking you to endorse the idea. I'm asking you a yes/no question. If Californians weren't a donor state and didn't pay federal income taxes, would that mean lower taxes? And if we didn't have federal regulations, would that mean lower regulations? Yes or no, sir? I'm done. How about you?
Yes, but I would argue the premises that that question was made.
So yes and yes was the record. Thanks, Hal. Back to you.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone for questions. If we have nothing further in the queue, I would like to move to closing questions. We're at 2:40 in the afternoon, and we've already gone a bit over our normally scheduled time. So it's like, Ryan, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you.
And it's although I disagree with you wholehearted on lots and lots of points, it's nice to meet you. If you'd like to start with closing arguments, I'd open the floor up. 2 minutes.
Sure. Okay, so and I think what we're dealing with, this conversation, I really appreciate everything Professor Williams, Shankar, Hal, and Marcus have said. I think we agree on a lot more than we disagree with. It's just simply taking the time to really fully investigate, a lot of how these beliefs are formed. I know me, I'm constantly questioning my beliefs every single day. I don't really hold things. I think Socrates says that he that knows the most knows he knows the least. And, humility, I think, is a necessary part. And the other thing is understanding that the media and schools have been engaged in a long time in this disinformation campaign to shape our thinking. And a lot of the points that came up today, this whole anti-Semitism, because I would challenge anyone who thought anything I said was anti-Semitic to specifically name what they thought I said was anti-Semitic, and I could refute that because I'm not an anti-Semite. I don't get angry because I've been called an anti-Semite, 2,000 times at least. And I have many Jewish friends who defend me, so it's hilarious. So I do want to be very careful though, because a lot of these are emotionally loaded terms, and there could be easily violence and killing could result from a lot of these things. I'm not advocating violence towards anybody. And I'm not a fan of the Holocaust. I'm not a fan of killing anybody because of their heritage at all, period. So to be called an anti-Semite is very troubling to somebody who opposed the Holocaust and all of that very thoroughly. Also, I will say, and I didn't bring this up, but I think the 19th Amendment was a huge mistake. Women getting the right to vote about 100 years ago. If you look at women's voting patterns, it's women and men's brains are clearly different. I'll argue that point all day. That's another point we didn't really bring up. And of course, I have opposition among that in my own movement. But I do really appreciate the fact that we were able to have a forum. Since I'm blocked on most big forums, the very fact that we have this discussion is important, because at the very least, either we strengthen our ideas or we learn new ideas. Either way, it's a positive. None of us on this call lost. So I think, you know, it was a very positive development. Thank you very much. And a lot of great points were made on all points. And I'm very grateful for being invited from this and welcome it in the future.
Thank you, Ryan. I look forward to verbally arm wrestling with you in the future. I don't see Shankar, so I will make a brief statement. I'll take my 2 minutes and then I'll turn it over to Marcus to take us out if you so desire. From my review of the New California site, and it's like, and I realize that this is probably, it's impossible to take a deep dive in a few days. The premise, it's interesting to see that a number of the premises, especially constitutionally, do share. Although from where we sit, it is going to be virtually impossible for California to ever achieve any sort of democracy under the current, you know, under the current federal administration. The way it is set up now, and there is no plan in the works to address for all the talk, to address things like the Electoral College or the bias of the Senate, or the inability to remove judges that are hostile to basically to Californians' overwhelming values or sense of values. After reading, I do have questions still have questions about New California. It's like water rights, mineral rights, the fact that the website 60% of the grievances have to do with immigration. To talk about assimilation, I understand, but also that is a dog whistle in itself. It's like all societies that came here both assimilated and kept their identities as well. Thus, you have Irish Americans, German Americans, Italian Americans, Mexican Americans. You know, to basically say that immigrants need to assimilate is a bit disingenuous, in my opinion, especially considering we have no Ellis Island. We have no means of actual legal immigration into America. California, as part of our plan, would seek to remedy that. Because these people who are immigrating are technically our neighbors, and to be honest, Latin American people have been here in California before, you know, before my ancestors arrived here. So let's talk about who belongs here and who does not. I believe we will have to agree to disagree. It's like, I don't believe that this new California economically would be viable. I don't believe this new California will get the votes necessary within the state house for it to happen, because honestly, if I were to campaign against it, all I would say is, if you live in Los Angeles or San Francisco, you're going to choke to death with no water within 10 years. But I understand. I didn't want to bring this into. It's like, I'm not a policy fellow. Basically, as I tell everybody within the independence movement, I'm a numbers guy. Mr. Ryan, I don't believe your numbers add up. But it is your right to believe as you do. And, you know, believe it or not, in an independent California, those social values, we would still support your right to have them. And at that, I will relinquish my time to Marcus for an end statement if there's no further objection.
I'll make a super quick statement. How very wisdom and knowledge as always. Shankar, very passionate, representing California values and how you make us all look good. Professor, insightful questions as always. Thank you, everybody in the movement who participated. Ryan, thank you for coming out. You know, the fact is that you were right. we don't do this. People on extreme ends don't talk, period. And whether I like it or not, while I disagree with New California, the fact is that you guys are the other movement. You do have media, you are recognized. There is clearly a fracture in California between progressives and red state people. And for us to pretend that that doesn't exist is not right. So I appreciate you, sir, coming in, at least starting a dialogue and being willing to be partners in a dialogue with us. Although we do not share values, we could at least talk with each other. That's important. And I would hope, sir, that you saw that we put forth real effort to make sure you had a fair chance to say your piece, although we didn't agree. And I would hope you would share that message to other people. We would like to continue the conversation, like Hal said, respectfully, although we're probably not going to agree, but talking about issues. And we didn't even get to the big differences in political, conservative, red versus blue ideology and how the state's going to run, or nation, as we call it. So I'd like to have you back. I hope that you found this fair.
And also, yeah, I'd be happy to come back, and I appreciate, you know, the opportunity, because, you know, and also what the founders of America had, they had some pretty fierce debates. And, you know, if any of us is in possession of the truth, we would have to think that our ideas could stand up to fierce criticism. And if they can't, maybe we should get new ideas. Just a thought. So, but I do appreciate the forum. Had we extended you that forum, we would have definitely given the same respect to you, that you would have been free to state that. We would not have attacked you as some anti-Semite and all that, because you're free to your opinions. And, you know, if we can logically tie that together with a certain belief, sure. But to illogically just blurt out accusations, that's something that I think we need to avoid.
Well, the name to remember, Ryan, and please tell New California, the name to remember when you're talking about hardcore lefty progressives is Independent California. That's Independent California, Independent California, Independent California. It's right there behind Hal's banner. Hal, move your head just to the side. Ryan, can you see that? Independent California, the black with the white.
I can see it.
That's the group. Independent California would like to continue a dialogue with New California. If you could tell New California that, hey, I found some progressives who were not total crazies, and we can talk with them. And they're called Independent California. They would love to keep the dialogue. And if you'd be willing to share this video, I'll make sure you get a copy of it with New California people and let them know, hey, there's at least a point here in California where some of the super hardcore progressives will talk with us, and just share the name with them, Independent California. If you share that video and you share that name, brother, we'll have you back. I'll leave it there. I'm out. I'm done, Hal.
I was going to tell you, the president of our movement, I could see if perhaps he can come on and do have one of these as well. So, but I would tell you what, I'm far more patient than he is. So, like, because there's no way, if it started off that way, he would have been off in like 5 minutes. So I would just caution, if it happens again, make sure someone doesn't just blurt out anti-Semite or anything if they hear something they don't like.
All right. At 2:51 in the afternoon, Sunday, October 18th, 2020, I'd like to end this conference and end the recording. If there are no objections, then I will close this meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Have a great day. Appreciate you all.